And Joe, I've also asked some other people to speak to this issue, so I have some chiefs that we talked to about.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. As you're all aware, probably we get the good, the bad, and the ugly here. It takes a long time, but eventually it gets here. I'm a lifelong resident of Fargo. This town's grown to a little over twice the size as it was when I was a kid. And there's been, recently we're all aware of the tragic overdose deaths that happened in our community, 3 in 1 week and 4 in a month. And currently we have the FM ambulance carries Narcan, which is a brand name of an opiate antidote drug, typically given to people that if they're having breathing difficulties for an opiate overdose. And according to FM ambulance, they're going to be using that probably 90 times this year. And statewide statistics tell us that opiate use in North Dakota is up in the last 5 years, has increased tenfold. And it also comes with the accompanying overdose deaths. And I got to looking at what other communities our size are doing, and it turns out that across the country there are a lot of law enforcement agencies. 2 years ago, 350 of them carried Narcan, and in just 2 years now there's over 780. So the reason you would want first responders and police to carry Narcan is because oftentimes they're the first people that show up on the scene of a potential overdose. And instead of standing around and watching somebody die while we wait for FM ambulance, we could have first responders or police, if it was required, to administer Narcan. Now, when I first asked to put this on the agenda, I was told that something was going to happen last Tuesday, which it did, that may negate all this. And that was, legislature passed 2 laws recently, and what they do is they indemnify, they expanded on the Good Samaritan laws. If you come across somebody who's overdosing, and whether you were involved with it or not, and you call for help and you stay on the line, then you can't be charged with a possession or use crime, which makes a lot of sense because that encourages people to not just abandon somebody in fear of repercussions. So that's good. They also have a law that was changed so that if you were to administer Narcan, that you're indemnified as a Good Samaritan and there's no repercussions. The problem was the North Dakota Health Department did not authorize the people, first responders whose job is to do life-saving, were not authorized. They were authorized to be lifesavers, and unfortunately the law did not protect them. So something happened last Tuesday, and I will have to give a tip of the hat and thanks to Fire Chief Dirksen. On more than one occasion he called me and explained some things, how the changes are working. And although it may not be public knowledge, apparently first responders in Fargo at some point will probably be carrying Narcan. So the second thing would be to ask if the police department could also be incorporated in that, and that you would authorize and make it happen that the police department can also carry that. I don't know if these changes that took effect, maybe it's a moot point, maybe the police department's already on board with it. I'm assuming not, because you're going to have the chief.
Well, I'm talking about responding, so they got some good news for you, Joe.
Okay. That's really all I have, unless you're, well, I guess that's it. I'm just a citizen. Those are my notes. I don't have a PowerPoint or anything else. All I can tell you is that it's a good idea, and I think you guys have the power to make it happen. So,
okay.
Thank you.
Ruth, do you want to go next, or do you want to see?
Sure, I can go on and you can do.
So, commissioners, what I asked them to do was come up. They had a task force meeting on opiate overdoses in the community, and Ruth has been talking to different providers, so I thought they'd update us on what's going on, and then some good news for the community as well.
Absolutely, thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. We actually pulled together a community group last week. Our ER doctors from our healthcare systems, along with fire and police from Fargo, West Fargo, Cass County, really to start the conversations. You know, I appreciate the comment about Narcan, and I think it could be a wonderful addition. But I think it's important to know that the use of Narcan is one component to our community addressing the opioid crisis. we really need to look at what type of treatment facilities are available, and, not that we can suddenly have more availability of those, but it's something for us to be thinking about. What do we need to have more opportunity for people to recover if that is what they are able to do. We need to have some, public education. What is this whole opioid crisis about? And, we have the opportunity as a community to partake in the first public forum, which will be happening May 5th. That is primarily sponsored by Prairie. That'll be out at one of the West Fargo high schools. So, bringing up the awareness, but it's a very multifaceted approach. We need education, we need provider education. Just recently, we've had a small group working with providers to limit the number of legal prescription medications that are given out for pain, because that's really the beginning oftentimes of opioid addiction. The hydrocodone, the Percocet, the fentanyl that's prescribed for chronic long-term pain that then individuals become addicted to. If those meds then aren't available, then heroin is often looked at as an alternative for that. The addition to our current crisis is that much of the heroin that's in our community also has the fentanyl in it, which really puts a whole new light on the strength and the ability of individuals to use that drug. So Narcan, it's a wonderful piece of the puzzle, but it's really important that as a community we'll continue to meet. We're going to have different groups working on different possible solutions or responses, and we'll keep you informed as we go along.
Very good. Chief Dirksen?
Good evening, not morning, it feels late this morning, but good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Just to let you know where we're at, last week the North Dakota Health Department Division of Emergency Medical Services authorized EMTs and emergency medical responders that have taken a prescribed course. They've allowed them in their scope of practice to now carry and administer Narcan, provided that a certain number of factors are taking place. First of all, we have to have protocols in place, and currently we are in the process of working through that. My phone's been ringing off the hook today. We've been working with FM Ambulance and other providers within the area. So we're doing it the same throughout the FM area. So that if it happens in West Fargo, they're doing it the same as we do it in Fargo, as they do it in Kindred and Moorhead and things like that. We want to do it right because all of our people talk to each other, so we don't want any confusion in this at all as well. So we're trying to be very careful about that. So we have to write the protocols. Then there's about a half hour of training that has to go with it. And then probably the most difficult piece is to figure out where we're going to purchase it and how we're going to purchase the Narcan to be able to carry it. The preferred method in the pre-hospital setting for non-paramedics is to give it in a nasal mist type of delivery process. And to get that, it comes in a pre-filled syringe and then an aerosolizer that we'd have to purchase. And we're not sure on the cost of that yet. We're working on that, but it looks like they're going to cost anywhere from $50 to $90 a kit for us to put those in place and go forward. FM Ambulance, in the way that they carry it in a vial, and then they draw it up through a syringe and needle system, and they've seen their cost go from $2 a vial to $13, so that's 650% increase. So we've seen this problem across our country, and what it's done is it's driven up the cost of Narcan as well. But this is one thing that we can do, and like Ruth said, this is just one part of the process. We have to look at the whole reason why we have an issue with heroin and why we need Narcan. The data that we went over last week in the meeting that Ruth spoke about, it was used 30 times by FM Ambulance in the first quarter of the year, and they saw about a 72% success rate in taking the person out of their opioid-induced problem that they were in. Some of those need to be rebolused again following that. So, I've seen the articles out there that call this the magic drug, and it's not the magic drug. It does reverse those effects, but as Ruth alluded to, with the cutting of it with fentanyl and other drugs. And the other thing we don't know is the underlying history of the patient or what other medications, or if they've taken alcohol with it. All of those things are factors in this whole process. So we want to know that, you know, it's out there, but again, it's incumbent, you know, that we're called right away, but that's not a guarantee that it's going to, you know, going to save a life, but we'll sure give it a try. So you know, I look for it. It's going to take a little while to get it in place for the fire department to be able to carry it, because now it falls under scope. And I know Commissioner Pepcorn called me earlier today wondering about how this would work for us, and you know, it falls well within our scope, and as we see, you know, it's 90 or as the gentleman, as Joe alluded to, it's 90 responses is what FM is predicting. You know, it's probably getting closer to 100 and 120 now for the year, but it falls well within the scope, and I would just put it as if we found a new piece of firefighting equipment that was going to save lives and would have a reason to do so, we would put that in place as well. So I think we can do it. It's just going to take us a little while, and I'll keep you updated on that as well.
Keep on.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, about a month and a half ago, we did a press conference with the chiefs and sheriffs to warn the community about what we were seeing with the overdoses and what we believe to be fentanyl now out on the street, either mixed with heroin or pure fentanyl. And we've continued to meet both as law enforcement and then with Steve and Ruth here to come up with, do some strategy sessions, and then come up with the public forums with Prairie St. John's, and then that one's going to be a lot geared towards providers and identifying what's out there and getting their input on how to address this issue. And what we also see is the possibility of follow-up forums after that, where law enforcement's going to take more of a back seat on those type of ones, and they'll be more oriented towards the families and people that have addiction issues, and trying to get them to come to those forums and steer them towards the right avenues of help. As far as Narcan or naloxone, right now under the health director, that requires an EMR or an EMT. We are neither one of those at the Fargo Police Department. We're CPR and basic first aid. But in speaking to FM Ambulance, what they recommend, because opiates are a respiratory depressant, they're recommending that we follow our training in CPR and provide respiratory assistance as Narcan is being administered by FM Ambulance or fire. You'll see other law enforcement agencies that do have first responder training, but oftentimes those law enforcement agencies do not have a full-time fire department, it's a volunteer department, or they don't have a localized ambulance service. So that has been more of a requirement to have that first responder training because of the lack of other resources. We don't have that lack of resources here in the city of Fargo. So right at this point in time, for us to do first responder would be a minimum of a 40-hour course for our people, along with the follow-up training. So right now we're going to take the assisting with respiratory issues until we decide further what to do.
Thank you. So there's 4 elements I want you to think about opioid addiction. Is that 4 out of 5 opioid addictions come from prescription drugs. So the one thing everybody in the room can do is if you have any prescriptions in your house, today you have surgery, you might have some left, you can come to the pharmacy and get rid of them. And what happens a lot of times is the kids get the drugs from the homes and then they start using them. Number 2 is that it's respiratory arrest. So I love this drug, fentanyl, because what happens is I can put Tony to sleep in 5 seconds. And that's how quick it goes. And he's asleep. He can't protect his airway at that point. Now, we can't always, so it's a respiratory arrest basically they get. So if a policeman carries a mouth-to-mouth mask, he can do mouth-to-mouth while he waits for somebody to come an antidote towards it. So I'd like all the police force to have that, which I believe you do. We do have mouth-to-mouth capabilities. And even family could do that. You could have a mouth-to-mouth if you were with a friend and doing it up or whatever. Carry a mask with you and you could start the resuscitation. Fire then would be able to have Narcan, and we'd have make an effort to do that in 2 months. I think, Mike, that you said with Chief Dirksen that you could have happen. And then I think Ruth is working on the fourth element. We don't always have places for these kids to rehab. So the hardest part is rehab capabilities with the hospitals. And my other belief is that that's what you're going to work with Prairie Psych and Sanford and Sentia to come up with some type of rehab help because what we're finding in the communities where you focus on rehab, it works better than focusing on what Chief Todd does, arrest and put them away. It doesn't necessarily help solve the problem. So I think our team is still working on this just for the public to know, Joe. We are solidly behind this. Chief Dirksen, Chief Todd, and Ruth will also answer the question if you need a Narcan kit, where to get it. Because I realize we can sometimes go to Moorhead and get it, but what can we do in Fargo? So we will work on that answer as well. Mayor Williams and myself have said, let's dump them down. Let's have a day in which we get rid of our narcotics in our house and get rid of them so we don't have that temptation for people. And I think people need to know the city of Fargo is firmly committed to try to work at this issue and see what we can do for our community. So I leave it open for any commissioners.
Mr. Chairman, one of the things Chief Todd talked about too is it's also temperature sensitive, and so in a police squad car, the temperature isn't always as consistent as what they have, and especially in an ambulance, which is always running. And so I called them both today because my main concern was a police officer. I want him focusing. They got a lot of things when they answer a call, especially as we've come to realize. And so I'm very supportive of having the EMTs and the ambulance be the ones to handle that, and the police to be supportive, because I think you got to have, if you try to do everything, then you're going to put yourself in jeopardy. So that was just, I'm very, very supportive. I think it's a great thing, and I'm very, the money we spend will be well spent.
Well, I would just ask the chief, there was actually a story on the Today Show about this and how people with chronic pain are no longer taking their prescription drugs and they're turning to heroin because it's cheaper. Can you speak to that? In our community, is heroin actually cheaper than the prescription medication?
In many cases, it can be, and oftentimes addiction to opioids starts with pain medication that's prescribed, and then eventually can be abused. Some people are just more